Well, welcome everybody. We will go ahead and call this meeting to order. We start our meetings with the invocation, which we observe by a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States
States of America,
and to the republic for which it
which it
stands,
stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under
under
God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Bajan.
Here.
Halliburton.
Here.
Haney Keith. Here. Nash.
Here.
Stead.
Here.
Willetts.
Here,
All present.
Yes.
All right, we've got one set of minutes from September 12th for approval.
Madam Mayor, I move approval of the minutes from September 12th, 2023 for the 6 PM meeting. Second.
We have a motion and a second discussion. Clerk?
Stead.
Yes.
Willetts.
yes,
Bajan.
Yes.
Halliburton.
Yes.
Haney Keith. Yes. Nash.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
And now the consent agenda. All items with an asterisk are considered routine by the council and will be enacted by one motion. There's no separate discussion on these items unless a council member or citizen so requests, in which case the item will be removed from the general order of business and considered in its normal sequence.
Madam Mayor, I ask that we remove resolution 543-23 from the consent agenda and defer for potential future consideration.
Motion, second?
Second.
Motion and a second discussion?
Madam Mayor, I have a question.
Yeah.
Is that number 12 on the agenda?
It's the Public Works item. Number 41.
Got it.
Staff
Thank you.
needs, staff needs more time, so that's been deferred. Well, and they'll be back.
Okay, thank you.
Did you make a motion?
He asked, but I seconded.
Yes.
Okay,
So that's
clerk, will
probably
you
enough.
call the roll?
Stead.
Yes.
Willetts.
Yes,
Bajan.
Yes.
Halliburton.
Yes.
Haney Keith. Yes. Nash.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
And Madam Mayor, now I move approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second discussion?
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I'd just like to point out that there is an art project, and I believe it's number 8 on the agenda for West Boise. And I was part of the committee of neighbors that looked at this as well as the city. And I'm very excited and thrilled that it's coming before this council. And I think it's going to be a great addition to the park there, and just appreciate the city's investment. So thank you.
Well, thanks for participating on that committee. And I will just point out, and I want to thank, I just turned the page, excuse me. Well, clerk, will you go ahead and call the roll? Oh, here we go.
Stead.
Yes.
Willetts.
Yes,
Bajan.
Yes.
Halliburton.
Yes.
Haney Keith. Yes. Nash.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
And just before we move on, I just wanted to acknowledge items 43 and 42. This is a deferral of impact fees for affordable housing at Denton Street. And I'd also like to thank the Ada County Highway District's deferral of fees as well that we've acknowledged and accepted in number 42 here. This is yet another way that the city and partner agencies can support those that are helping meet our housing challenges. And so really appreciate the steps that ACHD is taking alongside us. And now we will move into ordinances. We've got two, it looks like, on second reading.
Madam Mayor, I ask unanimous consent that all ordinances on the second reading calendar be read by number and title only and filed for the third reading calendar.
Without objection?
ORD 35-23. An ordinance enacting a new chapter 17 to Title 5 Boise City Code entitled Tenant Protections. Section 1 establishing the city's purpose. Section 2, defining the city's legal authority. Section 3, defining the scope of authority. Section 4, adding definitions. Section 5, prohibiting landlords from retaliating against tenants. Section 6, requiring landlords to provide tenants a notice of rights. Section 7, reserved. Section 8, establishing a rebuttal presumption for the return of tenant security deposit upon demolition or substantial remodel of a rental unit. Section 9, providing for severability of the ordinance sections. Section 10, providing penalties for violations, approving a summary of the ordinance, and providing an effective date. ORD 37-23, an ordinance amending Title V, Public Safety, Boise City Code by amending language in Chapter 15, discrimination prohibited on the basis of sources of income. Amending Section 5-15-1 to add to the purpose. Amending 5-15-2, definitions to amend and add definitions to include source of income. Amending 5-15-3 to add source of income in prohibited discriminatory acts. Amending Section 5-14-4 to clarify existing exceptions and add additional exceptions. Adding a new Section 5-15-8 severability, approving a summary of the ordinance, and providing an effective date, January 1, 2024.
Thank you. And we're going to move into the public hearing portion of the evening. The first two items have requested deferral. I think best that we take them up by motion.
Madam Mayor, are we having staff present on any of these?
Nope.
So I think that we. Madam Mayor, I move deferral for item number CAR 23-06 to an unspecified future date.
Second.
Motion and second, clerk?
Stead,
Yes.
Willetts,
Yes.
Bajent,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
Haney Keith,
Yes.
Nash,
Yes.
all in favor, motion carries.
And Madam Mayor, for the next one, I'm requesting deferral of CPA 23-06 to October 17th, 2023.
Second.
Clerk, we have a motion and second?
Stead,
Yes.
Willetts,
Yes.
Bajent,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
Haney Keith,
Yes.
Nash,
Yes.
all in favor, motion carries.
Thank you. And so then next item. Oh, gosh, Josh is up there. Okay. I saw you. I was confused. All right. So we're at DRH 2333, the Royal Plaza Master Owners Association. So this is an appeal. So we'll have Josh from the city present, the appellant, John Marshall. See. Okay, great. All right. And then the applicant, Ryan Hager and Austin Conger. Are you online? Do we have somebody from the neighborhood association here? All right, great. And then I've got a list of a couple folks that are parties of record. This is, and this is interesting, given that neither the appellant nor the applicant are here right now. I think we might want to take up the other item first. And then, and will you find out if the applicant intends to come this evening? Unless, yeah, I think that's what we ought to do. Because if we start and then the applicant's not here, we've got a problem. So now we're going to move to the next item. The Belgravia Old Boise Condominiums Association. So we've got Josh again, the appellant Matt Reese and Victor Miller. All right. The applicant Jason Miller from the city and the Neighborhood Association. Are you here for this one as well? I've got a Bruce for Downtown Boise Neighborhood Association. All right, and we've got a list of parties of record. So we'll go ahead and start this one because we've got the applicant and the appellant here. And thank you, Josh.
All right, thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm before you tonight for an appeal of the Historic Preservation Commission's decision to deny the appeal of an administrative certificate of appropriateness. And this is for an approval to install a standalone restroom facility in C.W. Moore Park in the Old Boise Commercial Historic District in downtown Boise. So the subject site is located on the northeast corner of Grove Street and Fifth Street. It is C.W. Moore Park, a public park. The applicant, the city of Boise, has proposed to install a standalone restroom facility on the site, located near the alley on the northern portion of the site and accessible directly from Fifth Street. The proposed restroom facility is a pre-manufactured type of facility that has been installed in Sheree Buckner Webb Park previously, is generally referred to as a Portland Loo in the application documents and in the appellant's documents as well. Some renderings of the location of the restroom in the park, again, very near the alley on the north side of the site. There is some minor landscaping and site work that will need to be done to make way for the building. That will entail cutting back that planter bed and removing 3 magnolia trees, one of which will be replaced on site. The other 2 will be replaced elsewhere within the city. Again, some perspective views of the location of that restroom facility. This would be from Fifth Street from the northwest. So at the March 27th, 2023 Historic Preservation Commission meeting, they took up the appeal submitted by the Belgravia Board of Directors of the administrative approval of the certificate of appropriateness. At that hearing, there was a substantial amount of new information submitted by the appellant. The commission felt it best to defer that hearing to the next available public hearing in order to digest and read that information and consider it for their decision. So at the next hearing in May 22nd, 2023, the Historic Preservation Commission took some additional testimony, deliberated on all of the information that they had received and rendered a decision to deny the appeal based on the proposal's compliance with the design guidelines for commercial historic districts in Boise and the findings required in the ordinance for approval. Those are detailed further in the packet that has been provided to council tonight. They also found that the proposal was congruous with the historic district, and much of the testimony and materials that were submitted at that hearing were regarding public restroom facilities and their standard practices in general, and then also potential users of facility. The Historic Preservation Commission specifically found that did not fall within the review of the certificate of appropriateness application. It was specifically focused on compliance with the commercial design guidelines and the findings and ordinance in regards to historic approvals, which are on the screen for you here. So after that decision was, the decision for denial of the appeal was issued by the Historic Preservation Commission, that decision was appealed to City Council, and we are before you here tonight to determine if the Historic Preservation Commission made an error in their decision. So the applicant or the appellant submitted their appeal on the following grounds. There are 5 grounds for appeal listed in the appeal application in your packet. Is that the industrial design of the restroom is not compatible or congruous with this historic theme character of the park improvements. The restroom location at the main entry has a detrimental impact on the main park features due to its massing and incompatible design. Location of the restroom offers no screening from park activities or from the adjacent property and is not per manufacturer's recommendations. False and misleading testimony was given at previous hearings. Documents that were submitted at the first hearing were not made part of the public record. Reasons stated for the denial of the appeal are in dispute. And significant landscaping is to be removed, compromising the symmetry of the park plaza. We have reviewed the grounds for appeal that were submitted and consistent with the Historic Preservation Commission's decision. They found that the standards in ordinance in terms of findings that are required to be made for approval of a certificate of appropriateness were met, and the Boise design guidelines for commercial historic districts were met as well. Many of the concerns outlined in the appeal documents are outside of the purview of those standards of review. We would recommend denial of the appeal, upholding the Historic Preservation Commission's decision to uphold the administrative certificate of appropriateness to install the standalone restroom facility. We do recommend that if as part of your motion to direct staff to return with findings for adoption by a council at a future meeting. And with that, I would stand for any questions.
Any questions for Josh?
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
Josh, can you go back one slide? So item number 3 there, it says the location of the restroom offers no screening from park activities or from the adjacent property and is not per manufacturer's recommendations. So I guess I'm trying to understand that a little bit more. Is there something specific about the manufacturer's recommendations that would say this can't be used this way? Or is the one that we have installed over at Sri Buckner Webb Park in a significantly different sort of
Yeah.
placement that's different than this one?
Madam Mayor, Council President Halliburton. So there's a significant amount of information in the appeal packet about best practices for this type of restroom facility and manufacturer recommendations that the appellant provided. They have quite a detailed presentation about that, so I know that they will get into some details of that, but essentially it is it's the location and accessibility of the restroom from the public right of way, having activities that may take place in the restroom being very visible and upfront to the public in terms of how close that facility is to the public realm, to the public right of way, is largely what the manufacturer's recommendations center around. The screening from park activities and adjacent property, the historic guidelines don't really speak to that aspect. Certainly, I think those two concepts do conflict a little bit. If we want the facility open and safe and visible, then heavy screening from either the street or adjacent properties is probably not appropriate. And there is significant landscaping in the park that has been pulled back away from the facility a little bit. That will help kind of soften and integrate it into the site without really concealing those activities.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I have a question for Josh. Josh, can you walk us through why this went to historic preservation?
Absolutely, Madam Mayor, Councilmember Willis, that's probably one of the more basic things I should have opened up with. So this park is within the boundaries of the old Boise Commercial Historic District. Therefore, any activity in the park, any new construction, landscape changes, a new restroom facility such as this, goes through what's called the certificate of appropriateness process. That is an application that goes through historic planning staff in order to determine compliance with our historic guidelines and ordinances. In this case, it was an administrative level application at first that was then appealed to the Historic Preservation Commission and now to council.
Madam Mayor, follow up.
Yes.
So if this wasn't part of an old commercial district and it was just any park in the city of Boise, what would the process have been?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Willetts, most parks in Boise are zoned A1 without a design review overlay, so it would not go through the design review process. Typically, an accessory building in a park that's zoned A1 would just go through what we would call a certificate of zoning compliance review to ensure things like setbacks are met, the height is met. There would be no discussion about design, really.
Thank you.
Anything further for Josh?
Madam Mayor, if I could, Josh, I guess the feedback I've gotten is surprise over cost. I'm less surprised having looked into cost to install bathrooms at other parks. Generally, the cost is wrapped up in the utility work to get it there. Could you just speak to the cost of the project and the funding source and so forth?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Nash, I will defer to our parks representatives on cost and funding sources.
And I'd say we can take that up in question when they're here. Can't be part of the consideration with regard to the appeal, but it's something that we've all been asked about, so it's good to get on the record. I'm wondering if maybe you should just come on up now with the parks. Oh, no, because, yeah, I'm sorry, I forget that you're going to be presenting. So will you address that in part of your presentation? Great, thank you. All right, thanks, Josh.
Thank you.
And now we will hear from the appellant. Victor Miller, Matt Reese. Are you Mr. Reese?
Yes.
Okay, all Welcome.
Hi. Do I have a time limit?
Yes, it's right up there. 15 minutes.
Okay, I timed it just a little over 15 minutes, so I'm also signed up as the applicant and then also as a.
Oh, we,
unit owner.
yeah, we don't have, if you're giving your 15 minutes as the appellant, we don't then have you speak again. So maybe you can talk a little bit more quickly to get the last minutes in,
I'll try
or
my best.
we might try to ask you some questions to hear the end.
Okay,
Okay, thanks.
okay. So my name is Matthew Reese. I'm at 499 West Main Street, Boise, Idaho, 83702. So Mayor McLean and members of the council, thank you for allowing me to speak here tonight. To be honest, I don't enjoy doing this and I'm not a very good public speaker. But I am here tonight to speak in opposition to the proposed Portland Blue restroom at CW Moore Park. So I come before you as board president of the historic Belgravia building, which is adjacent to CW Moore Park and would be within 30 feet of the proposed Portland Blue restroom. I also come before you as a unit owner of 2 office condominiums there. My personal opinions may or may not be the opinions of the Belgravia Association, but to be clear, we are both opposed to the industrial design of this restroom and its location. So full disclosure, I have no personal, financial, or political conflict of interest that I'm aware of, and I am not related to any paid consultants or vendors or city of Boise employees or anything like that. I'm just here to testify against a bad solution and a bad design. So a little bit about myself. I'm an architect practicing architecture for over 30 years in Boise. As an architect, I or my firm have done many historic preservation projects, many of them in downtown Boise. I've been in my office at the Belgravia building for over 20 years. I park in a lot on Grove Street between 5th and 6th, and I have walked through CW Moore Park about 2 to 4 times a day, 5 days a week for the past 20 years. So I know CW Moore Park. I know what goes on there, and I know that the restroom as proposed is a bad solution and a bad design. Although CW Moore Park is not a historic park, it is a historic theme park with many historical artifacts in a designated historical district. This needs to mean something and not be belittled by historical snobbery. This means, yes, there are many items in the park that are not historic, but they have all been designed and placed in the park to be compatible and complement the historic artifacts and the historic theme. The design of the park is complete and it is beautiful. The proposed Portland Blue is not. The grand entry is a large sandstone arch that was salvaged from a historic building that actually came from this site where City Hall is. You enter that park through that grand arch, and the first thing you will see is that restroom. And it frames, that entry frames perfectly the water wheel, the plaza, the historic artifacts. The proposed restroom destroys the symmetry of what we call the wagon wheel plaza. The wagon wheel plaza is this round plaza and has 2 bulbed out areas. Each side has 3 magnolia trees with a grove of pine trees in the back. The magnolia trees beautifully screened from the alley and the adjacent buildings. And that all gets leveled and in goes just a concrete slab and just a industrial unit that's just kind of picked from a catalog and just plopped down in there. Adding the Portland Blue restroom at this proposed location is by definition inappropriate. The location of the unit clearly competes with the prominent historic elements of the park and competes and detracts from the historic theme of the park. This alone should have been the justification for city planners to recommend a denial and should have been the justification for the Historic Commission to deny the project per your own ordinance. CW Moore Park is not your typical commercial or contemporary park. It is different and requires a different solution. Ask yourself this: if there was a proposal to place a Portland Blue at the Ada County landfill, would it look any different than what is proposed for CW Moore Park? I'm told the reason this project is that we have free money from the federal government and need to use it or lose it. I am told that the proposed location for the restroom is based on the proximity to the sewer line. So basically, the design of the restroom is about money. We are not anti-restroom. We're just opposed to this restroom design at this location. The restroom location doesn't even meet the manufacturer recommendations for siting one of these units. This area of town has seen a tremendous growth, especially in residential use. The number of people living and working within walking distance of the park has grown exponentially. However, so has the number of toilet facilities. There have literally been hundreds of toilets facilities constructed in the new residences and the businesses that are within walking distance of the park. So any statements about depriving somebody of a basic human need, I think is going to be a bit overstated. You'll probably hear testimony about how much this park is used as a justification for the restroom. When the park is reserved, it has the ability to provide a porta potty in a newly constructed concrete pad that is by the alley. But you probably won't hear how many times the park has actually been reserved and used. I have not seen a porta potty out there. I haven't seen one in years, actually. You might be presented a picture of the park full of people and presented as this is just a typical day in the park. And I think that picture is also very misleading. I think if you went to a Google Street View, you'll see that there's typically about 4 to 6 people at the park at any just given time. You might hear about school children that visit the park, and they also visit other parts of the city that don't have public restrooms, and they've been doing this for years. We understand that a public restroom on this end of town would be nice amenity. So the city of Boise is currently planning a brand new park on the corner of 6th and Grove, just 1 block away from CW Moore Park. It's a vacant parking lot right now. And they had an open house and they presented planned concepts of the park, and none of them included a public restroom. And so my question is why is this? This is the perfect opportunity to site plan a restroom and do it right. And it's arguably a busier corner. It's going to probably see more people. So to me, that seems to be the more appropriate place for a restroom. So I've asked these questions, and the responses I get is that different departments are planning these things and we have no control on what they're doing. Essentially, I'm kind of told that the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. I think that's why we're here tonight, which is I think there needs to be a bigger view of where it would be an appropriate place to do a restroom and not base it on free grant money or things like that. So I ask you to ask these questions. Number 1, is there a better opportunity to properly site plan a public restroom in this area of town? Is there a better site? Number 2, is there an opportunity when designing structures for a historic themed park than an appropriate structure designed for the area and not just a prefabricated industrial unit? Number 3, are we making these decisions for the right reasons? Free money from the federal government is not a good justification for a bad project. Number 4, is picking a spot based on proximity to a sewer line justification for a bad location? Number 5, what is the justification for the need for the restroom? Has there been a study done? There are many other places in town. We have Ceaselanders Park. It is used quite a bit more than CW Moore Park. It does not have a public restroom. Your new City Hall Plaza, open to the public, there to accommodate many larger groups of people. It doesn't have a public restroom. So the other thing that concerns us is that CW Moore Park, because it's kind of its secluded nature, does have a history of a transient problem. And so there's a question is, does this restroom add to that problem, or does it become a magnet or a destination point for this? And I think these are just questions that I don't think have been properly asked or answered. So I have been part of many public hearings, usually on the side of proposing projects. It is normal that people that are for a project, me included, have a financial interest in the proposal, and those that are opposed are usually opposed to change. I'm aware of the not in my backyard mentality, and I hope I don't come across as that. I did have 4 unique sociology classes in architectural school with an emphasis on how design affects human behavior. I did an internship with the San Francisco Planning Department and had very candid conversations on the difficulties of urban design. Designing public restrooms in a public park is hard. It's really hard. And bad design will lead to bad results. So I hope the council will come to the conclusion that the location and the design of this restroom and CW Moore Park is an inappropriate solution, and some reconsideration is needed. Thank you.
You did it faster than expected.
I know, sorry, I
No, it's,
took out a bunch of stuff and.
well, you did great. Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Reese? Yes.
Madam Mayor, I have one question for Mr. Reese, maybe two. You talked about the design of the restroom not matching the historic theme of the park or not being consistent with it. And then also the location. And what I'm trying to understand is if you feel there is a design for a restroom in this park that would be appropriate, or if your considered testimony is no restroom is appropriate in this park at all ever.
Well, we can only comment on what's been proposed to us. So we can play the what if game all day long on, well, what if we put it here? What if we put it there? Well, let's see that proposal then.
Let me try again. It's not, I don't want to play the what if game. I'm just trying to understand if your view and what you're hoping to communicate to us is that in your mind and your experience as an architect, there is a design for a restroom that could fit in this park, but this isn't it. Or if your testimony is based on my experience, there's no design for a restroom that would fit in this park.
I think the Shree Buckner Webb Park did it right. They put the restroom where it's not at the grand entry, it's off to the side. It's got a little landscape buffer, so it's not the focus of the park, but it is next to a parking lot and right next to the public road. So police and other people can drive by and quickly see if there's something happening there. And it doesn't feel secluded or whatever. It is out in the open, which is kind of the manufacturer's recommendation is that these things are highly visible. So I think that's an example of how you would do it right. Clearly, if you're designing a park from scratch, you have all the opportunity to do that. And I would ask the question on 6th and Grove, the park they're planning there, perfect opportunity. You have an alley with a parking garage. You could put the restroom right close to the road, but still screen it from park activity. So it's not the main focus of the park. It's like not the first thing to see when you enter into the park. Because, you know, nobody wants to put the restroom right at your front entry door. And essentially that's what we're proposed here at CW Mark.
Got it.
Park. We're just-
That's the answer to my question. Perfect. Thank you. So there's a way to do it, but this isn't it.
No.
Okay, thank
this
you.
is Not.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I asked this question of staff about the point that you brought up with the manufacturer's recommendation. And I'm trying to figure out what that has to do with the historic committee's discussion. And so is there a historic aspect of the manufacturer's recommendation? Because I guess my understanding of the historic committee hearing is that it had to do with whether or not this was historically appropriate. And so I'm trying to figure out if the manufacturer's recommendations has anything to do with it being historically appropriate in that area, or if that actually has to do with the staff's administrative decision.
So the Historic Commission has a very narrow focus, you know, but the city council has a wide view of everything. You can consider everything of you know, is this a an appropriate site, appropriate design, or whatever. And I don't know if the manufacturer's recommendations as far as sight lines and all that stuff crosses requirements of the historic. My guess is no, it does not. But it just goes back to just kind of basic planning of where would you want to put a restroom? Would you put a restroom right outside the front doors of City Hall? Probably not. We'd probably want to put it over more towards the corner, not right at the front entry.
Madam Mayor, just a follow-up there. So I guess what I'm hearing you say is that you're not necessarily appealing just the historic committee's decision that this was historically appropriate. You're appealing just the whole grounds of the bathroom
I
itself.
hope the council takes a bigger picture and just kind of looks at, hey, because, you oversee park planning and you can look from site to site and you're the ones that appropriate monies and all these things. And has that grander vision.
Great, thank you.
Anything further? All right, thank you.
So can he take the rest of the 4 minutes or?
Is this part, are you then,
Victor Miller?
sure, are you part of the appellant team or?
We are.
Okay, and then you heard me say that you don't testify a second time?
Me.
If you're part of this
Yeah.
presentation, great, okay.
Madam Mayor, quick,
Yeah.
I have a couple of questions too, but I can wait until.
Yeah, why
after
don't you
the-
wait
Perfect.
until he finishes
Yeah,
and
there might be
then,
more.
yeah.
Thank you.
So Mayor McLean, President Pro Tem Bajent, thank you for letting us speak. I'm Victor Miller. My wife and I own 2 units at the Belgravia. A bathroom should not be installed at CW Moore Park for 3 simple reasons. First, the loo ignores safety concerns, which I think are very important here. Just for context, no city has relied on its historical preservation to make a choice on whether they're going to install this. It's usually safety concerns, police, fire. The historical preservation site has not been the guiding force. Secondly, it is not a proper location. And third, Boise's own study shows little need for a bathroom in CW Moore Park. I reached out directly to Evan Madden, the sales manager at the Port and Lou Madden Fabrication. Mr. Madden sent me a white paper summarizing the results of a questionnaire sent out by Washington, D.C. to more than 24 other cities that use the Port and Lou. In it, cities mentioned many safety issues with the Portland Lou that should cause significant concern relative to CW Moore Park, especially given its close proximity to residential buildings. First, the CW Moore installation ignores every crime prevention through environmental design principle laid out by the manufacturer. It is not, quote, in an open, visible location with a lot of pedestrian and vehicular traffic during day and night. Secondly, it is not in or near a commercial area where eyes can be kept on the restroom during the daytime and into the evening. Third, it does not have good street lighting at night. And 4, according to what we've seen, there are no arrangements that have been made for police monitoring at night. Additionally, in the Washington, D.C. study acknowledged that the issues will arise after installing a Portland Lou, including criminal activity using for shooting up, possible use for prostitution, arson. Public nuisance issues include graffiti, sleeping inside the loos, and camping near the loos. Maintenance issues include local locks that are broken hinges and hardware, inappropriate items flushed down the toilet, frozen pipes. All these issues could create serious unintended safety risks and significant financial costs to the city. None of this has been considered. Second, the location of the Portland Lou at CW Moore Park is inconsistent with actual locations and of Portland Loos in other cities, including here in Boise.
Were these part of the original record? Are we, yeah, we can't take these. This is an appeal based on the record that the council has considered.
Okay, sorry. What you'll see in these pictures, though, is that given to us by Portland Lou, it's clear that the loos have been located in places with very open sight lines in very, very public places, including crosswalks, major city intersections, very, very publicly visible places. That's the point of these things. That's why when you look at Sri Buckner Webb Park and you look where that was located, it's an open sight line. It's right next to a parking lot. It's right next to a road. It's far away from residential buildings, far away from the commercial building right next door. So it's actually, I think that's done actually very appropriately. And the reason why that's done is that the open sight lines is because it is trying to adhere to the crime prevention through environmental design principles that I mentioned earlier. Lastly, the proposed CW Moore site location for the Portland Loo is within 20 feet of the CW Moore apartment buildings and only 25 feet from the side of the Belgravia building. The Portland Loo installed at Tree Buckner Webb Park, again with open sight lines near traffic and parking lots. Near businesses seems appropriate given locations in other cities, but CW Moore Park is just the opposite. It does not have open sight lines and has little traffic. Lastly, in its own March 17, 2023 memo, the Parks and Recreation Department for its city of Boise proves there is not a great need for the permanent bathroom. In this study, the city admits a bathroom at CW Moore Park is needed potentially from April to October, only on the weekends and only after 6. And the park averages only 10 events a year when it was active. This does not legitimize a full-time bathroom. Thank you for the time.
Thank you. Councilmember Stead, you've got some questions, and then Halliburton.
Thank you, Mayor. So this is for the appellant. What you're asking of us tonight is to find error in the decision by the Historic Review Committee, and based on our development code, based on this specific criteria, which would be that it's in violation of constitutional law, city law or state law, that it's the public hearing was inadequate, that it's arbitrary or capricious, or that the decision was not supported by substantial evidence. So I hear reasons why you aren't comfortable with this decision of development, but why specifically, based on this criteria, are we finding error in the decision that they made?
Sure. So when you're, the question is we are in a historic district. And so what does that mean? We're a historic theme park in a historic district. So some might say it's not a historic park, so therefore nothing in the historic ordinance even applies. You can do whatever you want to do. And if that's the case, why have the designation on that property as a part of the historic district? Why don't we just remove it? That's why I came to you and said that needs to mean something.
So then are we looking then at the decision is arbitrary, capricious, or an abuse of discretion?
The previous commission, I'm looking for the actual language here, so bear with me just one second here.
I'm going to suggest you've got a rebuttal. Perhaps we could leave that
Perfect.
question to the rebuttal.
Thank you.
So you've got some time to look through.
Okay, I'll do that.
Great,
Thank you.
thanks. We just moved that to rebuttal. So
Oh.
you don't have a question? Okay. All right. So now we will hear from the members of the public that are here, that are parties of record, but I have one question.
Madam Mayor, just before that, the applicant.
Oh, that's right, the applicant. And do we have the neighborhood association? Are you the neighborhood association? Has the neighborhood association, Bruce? Let me check. Mistorovich is not here. Okay, all right. That's right, the applicant. Come on up. Welcome.
Madam Mayor, Council, my name is Jason Miller. I'm the Design and Development Project Manager for Boise Park and Recreation. I'm a licensed landscape architect with over 20 years experience. And I'm here today to discuss the proposed restroom at CW Moore Park. The park, as you know, serves the downtown community and provides a wonderful place to enjoy coffee, lunch, or just a few moments on the park bench surrounded by a vibrant and ever-growing city. It contains numerous historical elements that are leased by the city of Boise from the Idaho State Historical Society. The elements vary in size, nature, and historical significance. The charm of the park is in its location, respite for shade, and enduring elements. The park is reservable, and events such as weddings and family gatherings are frequently held at the park. As the event sizes and requests have increased over the years, the park has retained its nostalgia despite the need for modern accommodations. Events that are held at the park on weekends and evenings have increased in a need for a restroom. Current accommodations are made by placing portable restrooms in the north alley during events. The public has provided consistent feedback to Boise Park and Recreation that the increased volume of park users results in the need for a more permanent facility. Last year, Boise Park and Recreation was provided an opportunity to apply for and obtain federal funding for a permanent restroom at the park. Without this funding, a new restroom would not be an option to add a new amenity to an existing park. Recognizing the importance of the park, Boise Park and Recreation held a public meeting in December to discuss the proposed restroom. At that time, the restroom design placed the facility even closer to the alley along the north side of the park. The concept was to minimize the overall impact to the park and preserve the existing magnolias and the park character. The appellate attending the meeting provided valuable feedback and concerns that the restroom should be moved further from the alley. And we listened, and this was addressed in the current design. Our goals for this project were to provide a restroom amenity to the public, as this is a basic need that Boise Park and Recreation strives to provide in all our park and public facilities. The second goal was to remove the need for portable restroom during events in the north alley adjacent to the Belgravia building. The third was to utilize the federal funding available, which was an opportunity through a community development block grant. And the significance of this is that it will benefit low to moderate income persons, preventing and improving the health and welfare of the overall community. This is not something that we could just do in all of our parks based on the community. So, and our fourth goal was to address future demand and growth surrounding the park. As development has reshaped the boundaries of the park, the use of the park is notably increasing, and the anticipating improvements of the old Boise blocks and the Grove Street and the demands along the park will continue to increase as it continues. So the location of the park, or the location of the restroom was selected because its proximity to utilities, the existing use along that north alley, and its limited impact to the overall park. The goal was to preserve the existing park features in their current state and access the utilities that are available in the alley. It's not just a sewer line, but all of the utilities are within that alley. And further location of the building in different site planning locations would actually incur additional trenching, excavation, replacement paving, and walls, which would further impact the character of the park. So due to the need to place the restroom further away from the edge of the alley and to address crime prevention through environmental design principles, additional space around the structure is required. And the proposed plan will replace one of the three magnolias to be removed because we had to make such a large impact to shift the structure. We're going to replace one of those. The other two we're going to look at replacing with the proposed master plan update, which is coming up in FY25. And if we can't find additional locations that are suitable, we'll mitigate those by planting 2 trees elsewhere within the city. So just as just as Ford and Chevy represent individual truck manufacturers, there are similar manufacturers of a sidewalk restroom. So the Portland Loo restroom and a Romtech restroom are very similar products, each having the same features and appearance. The proposed restroom is manufactured by Romtech, which manufactures a restroom similar in size, proportion, elevation, and features as the Portland Loo. The maintenance advantage of this restroom is that it has a square door, reducing stress on the hinges, and an external hand washing station that complies with local health code requirements. So the sidewalk restroom was chosen over a permanent building, which would take up considerably more space within the park and have a greater impact to the sight lines within the existing park. The scale of the structure is appropriate to the park, and a single-use restroom will sufficiently serve the public needs. The simplified appearance of the building blends easily within the landscape and does not visually detract from the historical details within the park. So the elevation and plan views are shown in the following slides. The building is, like I said, simple, vandal resistant, and designed with safety considerations, including UV lighting to discourage needle use, sharps collector box, and louvers to indicate when it is in use. Parts are readily available, and our staff has similar experience with Sherry Buckner Webb Park. The location supports the crime prevention through environmental design principles with the following. There's natural surveillance with adjacent residents and proximity to Fifth. There's natural access control is not needed, such as a gate, fence, or boundary, because it's in a public park. Pavement, treatment, art, signs, and maintenance all support the visual cues for the structure. Sight lines to the building include 5 foot surrounding all sides minimum, and there are no hidden spaces within the alignment that you'll see in the visualization. So Boise Park and Recreation is responsible for the ongoing maintenance and upkeep of the park. We have a proven track record of maintaining our facilities and addressing concerns as they arise. Graffiti is addressed within 24 hours. Litter pickup is addressed daily, and our current parks demonstrate that they are owned and cared for. So this graphic here illustrates that there's different color options for the restroom. Our staff preference is more of a gray or a brown so that it limits it being a target for graffiti. And this is the actual structure that we are proposing. So here's some graphic illustrations of how the restroom, it does not obscure the archway, the entrances, as well as the main plaza itself. All of the historic elements are able to be retained. We're able to relocate the existing wall with the magnolias so that there is more visibility around the restroom. But again, it is highly visible from Fifth, and it is, but it is not the prominent feature within the park. There's some, this one illustrates how far that we've pushed it off of the alley within our building setback line, so that, again, that it doesn't, the further that it goes, the more impact it would have to the central plaza. The location that it's in now is further from the edge of the Belgravia than the portable restrooms that are being utilized at the moment. Just going to flip through these because Josh showed these. In response to the report regarding the public restrooms, the report identifies that public restrooms are needed, and Boise Park and Recreation shares the goal of the report to provide amenities to our community. The report advocates for the government to install clean, safe public restroom is needed in commercial areas, and we feel that there is a need here for this. Boise Park Recreation acknowledges that occasional problems will arise, including broken locks, stopped up toilets, graffiti, frozen pipes. We've seen it all and worked to address it as a team. We share the common goal to address a need within the underserved portion of our community, and the report also clearly states that a standalone public restroom can be designed in a clean, safe way to minimize illicit activity. The location has been chosen based on the same principles in the report, which is visibility from the sidewalk and street, adjacency to resident shops, civic buildings nearby, and there is appropriate lighting with 2 lights on Fifth, 2 lights on Grove, and 3 additional lights on the colonnade. So in conclusion, as stated in the report, the cost to the city would be much greater if people didn't perceive downtown to be a welcoming and clean place. This is a community need brought to us from the public. Boise Park and Recreation has a proven track record of care of our facilities, citing Sherry Buckner Webb as an example. We have made accommodations to the appellant with the goal of limiting the impact of the structure to the existing park, and further changes would generate more impact and seem unnecessary. As previously mentioned, this is a rare opportunity to add a needed amenity to an existing urban park. This is not something that we would otherwise be able to provide, and we believe it meets a key need. At Boise Park and Rec, we strive to meet the current public needs and anticipated future needs. And with the growth surrounding C.W. Moore Park, we feel that it is our responsibility to seek out opportunities to identify funding when appropriate that will benefit our community. We believe that this project will greatly benefit our community members. With that, I'll stand for any questions.
Thanks, Jason. Any questions? Yes.
Madam Mayor, just quick ones, I hope. Lots of stuff there, and it's all obviously been very considered and very thought about. But here on an appeal from the Historic Preservation Commission, well, I can't say what matters most. What seems like it ought to matter most, at least to me, is the property consistent with the design guidelines for the Boise's commercial historic districts? That's what we're here to discuss. So my question is, did you consider those? And did you discuss those in the Historic Preservation Commission meeting you had?
Yes, we believe that the structure is consistent with the design guidelines for the
And-
historic district.
And that's what the the commission found as well, right?
Yes.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor,
Yes, go ahead.
question, Jason, thank you. Could you speak to the cost? I know you mentioned a federal grant, and I also know that there was a line item in the last budget. Could you educate us a little bit on that?
Yes, Madam Mayor, Counselor. As we know, public bathrooms are very expensive, and the largest cost is all of the infrastructure that's required for a public restroom. The cost on this restroom is right around $350,000 as it stands right now with the current proposal that we have here. This is within the grant for our funding, and it's honestly, that's a pretty typical kind of going price for a public restroom at this point. With this being a single-use restroom, it has less cost than if there was a double-use restroom, which we feel would be too large in scale and would create even greater impact to the park. So the summary is that the amount of infrastructure and cost required to install a public restroom is very expensive, largely due to the site work.
Thank you.
Mayor.
I think there's a Councilmember Willetts, do you have a
Yeah.
follow-up?
I do.
Yep.
Jason, can you also speak to the city's planning about which parks will need restrooms like these and which won't? Because it sounds like part of this was due to the opportunity of the federal grant, but could you speak to the general strategy on public restrooms?
Yes, Madam Mayor, Councilor, our general strategy is that the level of service is really determined based on the classification of the park. So if we're at a regional park, we're anticipating large users coming from, everywhere surrounding the city of Boise, right? It's a really large draw. Therefore, we need to provide more facilities. As we step down to something that's more of like a community level park, again, we still want to have a lot of facilities because we're asking people to come to visit the park. An example is like Julia Davis Park, where that is a draw to the area. In regard to the majority, we have a lot of smaller parks, which are more of a neighborhood park. And that neighborhood park really anticipates the quarter mile to half mile radius around the park. And what that does is a lot of times there is not a high need for a restroom facility in a park like that because the size of the park is typically smaller and it's more for local residents. So in this instance, this park is appropriate just because of the density of population around the park, as well as, like I said, the low income qualifications and the way that the future growth is kind of quickly occurring around the nostalgic, CW Moore Park.
Madam Mayor, I have one more, but I know that there's other council members, so I'll wait.
Go ahead. That way I don't miss you since you're remote. Why don't you go ahead and then I'll do in the room.
So Jason, here's another question for you. If this wasn't part of the historic district, would city council be seeing this, or would it just be part of the city's general authority?
Madam Mayor, Councilor, I believe that this would not be the case. I believe that we would be able to put a facility within our park because as we see funding and we have opportunities like this to add amenities to our park, that is our goal, to serve everyone in parks where we're able to.
Thank you.
All right, I think Councilmember Stead had questions.
Yeah, I just kind of for my own curiosity, I imagine, I know that we have another one of these in the Buckner Webb Park. So I was curious, have we had any crime issues there? Is there, for this proposed restroom, is there like hours of operation or months of operation? Is there a maintenance and monitoring schedule? All of that.
Yes, Madam Mayor and Councilor. Yes, there is In a lot of our parks, we close the restroom through the winter months, and that has to do with largely the infrastructure just not being able to support the extreme cold temperatures that we have here. So I think from my understanding and discussions with our maintenance staff, this is something that we will be keeping open year round. We do keep Sherry Buckner Webb open year round. And when I say open, I mean, we do our very best because we're dealing with frozen pipes, all kinds of things, you know, that need to be repaired as that is ongoing. And that's one of the interesting things, like I mentioned, like between the two products of the Portland Loo versus the ROMTech, our maintenance staff feels like the ROMTech may be a better option for the Portland Loo. So even though they're identical, the plumbing setups are like slightly different. And so that's why we're wanting to explore this option on this project. But our intent is to keep this open in the winter and to keep it serviceable for the public.
Great, thank you.
Further questions? Well, Jason, I want to say thank you because we typically wouldn't see these were it not for it being in a historic commercial district. You typically aren't under the gun in front of city council. So I appreciate your time, your presence, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, add one more,
Oh,
please.
one more.
Yep. So my question is, if the council approves the denial, what are the criteria set up forth for the federal grant? Is there another opportunity within the city of Boise, or would the federal money be lost?
Madam Mayor, Councilor, I believe the money would be lost in regard to this project. We do have opportunities for similar grants on other park projects that we are pursuing, but this one is earmarked for this project.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, now we'll go into the public testimony. So I'm going to start with, I've got a sign up sheet. We've got the two appellants and then Susan, I'm sorry. Come on up. And then sir, were you planning on testifying as well? And you were party of record? I'll go ahead and have Susan testify and then I'll have you come up. I'll just make sure you're a party of record. Yeah, because there are multiple people that are in here that aren't on my sign up sheet that I'll call through.
So I'm sorry, should I talk now or?
No, Susan, I called Susan. Are you Susan? I called Susan up. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for hearing us. I just feel that
Oh, could you read your name and address into the record, please?
Susan DeSelhorst, 431 and 461 West Main Street.
Thanks.
This is a little neighborhood park. It's smaller than this room that we're in, and it's mainly used by those of us who work or live nearby, and having a restroom there rather unnecessary. Losing trees is always a horrible thing to do, especially beautiful trees like those. There are better locations nearby. Property here at City Hall would be an excellent location for it. More traffic, easier to police. And there's basically, I just support everything that the board members from the Belgravia have said. That's really about all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, sir, you can come on up. I just need to make sure that you testified in the first hearing, since this is an appeal. What's your name?
I'm sorry, in terms of what?
Could you talk into the mic? What's your name?
My name is Greg Buchanan. I'm resident 420 West Main.
Great. Okay. I just had to make sure that you had testified in the past.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yes, again, I'm Greg Buchanan, 420 West Main. I live at the Veltex. I live about a half a block from C.W. Moore Park. As it's been mentioned here a couple times, the reason we're here is because it is in the historic district, and I believe you would consider it a historic park. It looks like a historic park in every way.
Sir, will you pull this a little closer? I just want to make sure that Councilmember Willetts online can hear you.
Can people hear me now?
Yep, much better.
Okay.
Thanks.
Again, Greg Buchanan, 420 West Main, Veltex building. I live about a half a block from C.W. Moore Park. And as the point's been made here a couple times, that the reason we are here is because it's an historic district, and it is an historic park. It looks like a historic park. All the aspects of it are historic park. It is an historic park. It's one of the things that Cities Boise has chosen to support our history.
And so I believe that this park should be maintained in that regard. I live in the Veltex building. It also has some historical aspects to it in terms of presentment. So it's part of the historical district. The Portland Loo, I'll just quote from the Portland Loo's website. It's a modern design originally focused on function and durability. The Portland Loo is a sleek, freestanding public restroom designed to deter criminal activity. It goes on to say that the Portland Loo focuses on crime prevention aspect of public restrooms. And then it further goes on to say that speaking about drug use, the Portland Loo also uses blue lights to prevent drug users from locating veins. I suppose in some aspects, some areas that might be a good thing, but the feeling I'm getting is that this is not a structure that should be located there. Obviously, there are many other parks in Boise. There are, because of their age, there are a number of parks that have, I would say, historical restrooms, perhaps more expensive than this, but certainly stone, really appropriate. And so that can be done. Maybe it's a matter of cost. The other aspect of this is there are better locations. Again, considering this is a historical park and a small park or pocket park, whatever you want to call it, for the neighborhood. There's a new park, of course, just down the street between 4th and 5th on Grove. There are significant but not finished plans for Grove Street. There's significant plans for development and adding public infrastructure to support that. To my knowledge, this structure is in no way part of that plan, nor has there been any coordination with it. But I do know that the new park down the street, in reading about it, is anticipated to be well used. And as I understand, is, if you will, designed for a number of events. It's located well for events, and I think that's the encouragement. Again, wouldn't a
Time.
public restroom be appropriate for that location? I think it would.
Sir, you're at time. I'll give you a wrap-up sentence.
Okay. Well, again, I thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. All right, anybody else? Oh, will you grab this for me and will you put your name on here? And Mr. Buchanan, will you write your name on here as well? So we've got the record of everybody that spoke.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. I'm Jennifer Stevens at 445 West Main Street in the Belgravia building.
Could you, again, the
Not
volume, I
working?
think, just maybe get a little closer to it.
Councilwoman Willetts, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Great.
Okay. Jennifer Stevens, 445 West Main Street, which is a unit of the Belgravia building. I want to say a couple of things that are probably things that the council already knows, but I just want to point out for the record. This park that we're talking about is in fact, of course, in a historic district, but there is no such thing as a historic park in the city of Boise. There's no such designation, and C.W. Moore Park certainly isn't called that. There's no such thing as a historic theme park. And I would just say, just so you guys have a little bit of background regarding the history of this park and the history that's in the park was designed in the 1970s, and it was right at the tail end of urban renewal. So many buildings downtown and many structures had been demolished. As a result of that, when this park became the subject of it became a park and it was being designed, the idea was to put some of these objects into the park with the hope of having some interpretation in the park that went along with the objects. So if you go through the park today, you'll see actually under some of those objects that there are some inset areas where you might expect to see a plaque, for instance. And those plaques were never placed. So in fact, unfortunately, what we have is a park where there's a whole bunch of stuff that nobody knows what it is. So there is some interpretation on the corner where the turret is located. But unfortunately, there's the interpretation that was supposed to happen never occurred. So just so you kind of have that background on what the park is. And I would just argue as a historian myself that the restroom itself is not going to be a detracting factor in this particular park. As I mentioned, there's already no interpretation. So having a restroom there certainly is not going to make that problem any worse. I did work in the building in my condominium there for 7 years and also walked through CW Moore Park many, many times over those years. And it is a lovely place with lots more people than 4 to 6 people in it on a regular basis. As you all probably are aware, there's a great deal of development happening in the area right now. CCDC, of course, has an urban renewal district there, and there is a lot of stuff happening there. I will also just say one final thing, and that is I would support not only a restroom in this park, but also a restroom in the park down the street. I think that the city should be putting restrooms, as many as possible, in the parks and in lots of public spaces because we are growing tremendously and going to the bathroom is a human need. When I see children in the local preschools at this park for their recesses, when I see business people that are there having their lunches, when I just see regular everyday citizens there, they need to go to the bathroom. Everybody has to go to the bathroom. And frankly, it smacks a little of not in my backyard to say that this restroom should go someplace else. So, yep, thank you.
Thank you. All right. Anybody else? Okay, yep, you're on the record. You can come up. Welcome.
Good evening. How's that? Good evening, Mayor McLean and City Council members. My name is John Stevens, address 318 East Highland View Drive, Boise. As an owner of a Belgravia condo unit adjacent to the park and a 20-year tenant of the CW Moore office building just south of the park, I strongly support the construction of this public restroom at this location now. Providing public facilities for basic human functions keeps the city clean and takes pressure off private businesses who otherwise end up providing these services to the public. Frequently during the week, the park is filled with young school children, their teachers, and and adult members of the public enjoying the outside space throughout the day. The nearest public restroom I'm aware of is located here in City Hall, 3 blocks away, and closed after business hours. 3 blocks is a long way for small children to walk in a hurry. Like the restroom at Cherie Buckner Webb Park at 11th and Bannock, this one will be discreet, clean, functional, and safe. It's an appropriate location for a restroom in an area that is otherwise underserved for public facilities. I'm confident in the city's ability to maintain it properly. Please construct it. We need more like it throughout the city. And in my opinion, the public restrooms ought to become standard features in other outdoor public spaces. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else here for this? Anybody online?
Madam Mayor, I don't have any other parties of record online.
Okay, thanks. All right, with that, we will move into rebuttal. First, we have the applicant, because then the appellant gets the last word. So Josh, are you doing the rebuttal? I see moving. Mr. Miller? Anything to wrap up?
Madam Mayor, Councilor, I would just add that the 521 Park, which is the park that doesn't have a name, that's a little bit down from the intersection of 5th and Grove. That park is being implemented by CCDC. And as of right now, that will be a park that will be donated to us. So we have some input, but I would encourage anyone that wants to see that park with the restroom to do so, to support that. So.
Thank you. All right, come on up. And I let Mr. Reese know that first he could take up Councilmember Stead's question, and after that, we will turn on the rebuttal time. I think he's got it. Yeah. The
Did you wanna
question,
ask the question again?
oh,
or-
sure, I guess so.
Yeah, so we, on appeal, our Boise Development Code requires us to find, we're looking for error in the decision made by the Historical Preservation Committee. The guardrails that we have for that are either that it was a violation of constitutional, state, or city law, that it was, the public hearing was inadequate, that the decision is arbitrary, capricious, or an abuse of discretion, or that the decision is not supported by substantial evidence. So I guess if we're to side with the appeal on this, we need to be able to tie it back to one of these criteria. So I was hoping for some guidance from you on which of those criteria you're aligning the
Sure.
appeal to.
I would say it's a bit arbitrary because the language in your ordinance is so subjective. And so the line is that does the proposed project by the adopted guidelines is that the request will not be incongruous with the historical, architectural, archaeological, educational, or cultural aspects of the district. So we are in a district. And I always have to look up the word incongruous to get a better understanding of, what are we asking here? And the definition is it lacking in harmony or is it incompatible? I would say that the design of that restroom is lacking in harmony and incompatible with the rest of the district and that park, the theme of the park. And it's, placing the restroom right at the front entry, I think not only would that just be inappropriate for your park, your theme park and the experience that you're trying to establish at that park, it would be kind of inappropriate for any park. I don't think you'd want to have that right when you walk through that sandstone arch entry. That's the first thing you see. And then again, the design of it is very incongruous with the rest of the park.
Thank you. And Mr. Miller?
So I would say, so I would argue that the decision is arbitrary, capricious, or an abuse of discretion in that it was made without rational basis in disregard of facts and circumstances presented. And secondly, that the decision is not supported by substantial evidence. Historical preservation has not been the basis that cities use. The bottom line is the city's completely not thinking about safety. It's not thinking about being 25 feet from an apartment building with several hundred people living in it. It ignores the manufacturer's recommendations on how these should be placed in. They ignore crime prevention through environmental design. They ignore the criminal activity that's been very evident at some of these. And we also have public nuisance issues. All these have been ignored. So I don't know how this is not capricious and arbitrary.
Okay, thank
And
you.
lastly, the Shree Buckner Webb Park is a good example of how this works. This is not the right kind of park for this.
Thank
It's
you.
hidden.
We'll move into rebuttal now.
I don't really have a prepared speech for the rebuttal. So we can argue on the narrow focus of this being in a historic district and a historic theme park. It is what it is. And that, is this an appropriate location for it? Is this element adding or detracting to the other elements in the park? And I think it's clearly detracting in its prominent location. And just the removal of the landscaping that helps form that wagon wheel plaza. I would like the council to also consider the bigger picture, which is you've got a new park 1 block away that's being designed from scratch. And right now, there's no public restroom there. And that's actually to me, the logical place to do it. We are not anti-restroom. We're not trying to say no restroom, period. This park is a special place, and the design of the restroom and where it's located is what is inappropriate, and that's what we're contesting. So the park that's being planned and also the project of redoing Grove Street, I hear rumors that's also going to involve reconstructing the south side of C.W. Moore Park. I have not seen much information on that, but I think I asked the council, take that bigger picture view and ask those questions first before we just plop something down right at the front entry of the park.
Thank you.
Thank you.
With that, before I close the record, any additional questions for staff?
Madam Mayor, I've got some questions for staff.
Great.
Thanks,
Go ahead.
Josh. I just want to be clear on a couple things. So we grant staff administrative authority to put a bathroom into a park. That's not something that would take, council approval or planning and zoning approval. That's administrative approval that we give to staff. Question mark.
Madam Mayor, Council President Halliburton. So from a historic preservation perspective, that is an administrative decision. We have a decision matrix that determines what goes to the commission, what is administrative. That is an administrative decision for the planning part. I am sorry, I'm not familiar with parks facilities planning in terms of the process that goes on there, but from planning standpoint, administrative, yes.
Yeah, I guess, so one of my questions is that, it's very clear to me that the group that's testifying tonight, they're not appealing the Historic Preservation Committee's decision. They're appealing, they're in disagreement with the administrative approval for this facility in this location. But that's not something that we have available for the public to appeal outside of it being in a historic area. So there's not a method for them to appeal to city council or planning and zoning outside the historic.
That's my understanding.
Right. The issue at hand tonight is the certificate of appropriateness, not the decision to locate the bathroom there, which is administrative, which is why we don't see Jason Miller on the topic of bathrooms. But this is here tonight because of they've appealed the certificate. But as council member said, there are certain things that have to be looked at as to whether or not the commission erred with regard to the certificate that they issued.
Yep. Yeah, you said that much better than I was trying to ask in a question.
Did you have others? All right, I'm going to close the hearing and ask that there be a motion before deliberation. So a motion on the table before deliberation.
Madam Mayor. I would move to deny the appeal in DRH 22-00437.
Second.
I move to deny the appeal because I think there are two different issues here, only one of which is in front of us. So the one that's in front of us is, did the Historic Preservation Commission make an error in its conclusion that the certificate of appropriateness required XYZ elements? And that has to do with the design guidelines, judgment calls, certainly, sir, as to whether something is congruous or incongruous. But they're a specialized body, and our code directs us to recognize their expertise in these substantive areas. So on the discussion that mattered most to me was this arbitrary. Our code instructs us that when there's room for two opinions, action is not arbitrary and capricious if the planning and zoning, or excuse me, the Historic Preservation Commission exercised honestly and upon due consideration. Reading their transcript, they clearly considered all of this stuff. They thought about it, they chewed through it, they worked on it. I take your bigger point, though, that you don't like the bathroom and you don't like it in this park, and you think there's a better park for it or better place for it. And I applaud you, particularly for participating in the planning process early. The design was accommodated and moved around. to consider input that you had. That's the right process and the right place to do it. And I understand the design is hopefully a little better because of your participation early, but that's the right place for those kinds of decisions. And they've been made administratively here. On the historic preservation issue, the commission didn't make an error on the things that it was supposed to consider. That's my conclusion.
Madam Mayor, there was some discussion at the Historic Preservation Commission about color appropriateness, and I think that that was something the Parks was still continuing to look at and trying to figure out a way to make that as appropriate as possible for that area. So I guess I would ask, Parks to continue to explore ways to make it look as good as we possibly can. I agree with everything that Council Pro Tem Bajent said. I would add that, some of the things that I heard tonight, that this isn't an ideal area for it, and that there isn't a lot of traffic, and that this park isn't used by very many people. I don't know if I agree with those things, but that's not what we're hearing tonight. I've been in that park a number of occasions. I often have to leave if I'm trying to prepare for a council meeting because there's too many preschoolers there using the park at the same time. I know that there's a bathroom that they would be using if they're there. I've conducted 3 weddings at that park before. We've had to bring in a porta potty every single time. Would have been nice to have had one there. There's police that are in that area more so than most other areas of the city on a regular basis. It's a very heavily trafficked pedestrian street, and one that we see more pedestrian activity coming forward in the future as Grove Street and some of the other areas develop there. So I don't agree that this is a bad location for a bathroom. And it's actually, as the Parks and Rec liaison on council, it's the first time I've actually heard somebody request not to have a bathroom in their park. They usually are wanting more bathrooms across the city, and our challenges are, with the frozen pipes and everything else. And so we have porta potties in parks across the city, and the neighborhoods hate it, and they really want there to be a permanent facility there. And so there's other groups that would be fighting for this. Again, those are none of the things that we're hearing tonight. We're really just hearing the focus of the Historic Preservation Committee. And I think Council Member Bajent laid out very clearly that there wasn't any error in the narrow scope of their decision.
Madam Mayor, quickly, if the secretary consents, I'd like to amend my motion to deny the appeal as we discussed, but instruct staff to return with findings.
Second.
Did I hear you?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
I concur with all the points that Council Member Bajent so eloquently stated. I'll just say from my personal experience, I'm jealous that this park is getting a bathroom. I would like parks in my part of town to get more bathrooms. There's 56 parks with playgrounds, and I would like them all to have bathrooms. And if they weren't so expensive, I'd probably be proposing that. I am the oldest of 9 children and 7-year age gap between me and the next one. So my youth is filled with memories of my parents awkwardly running around from business to business, trying to find a place for my siblings to use the restroom. And it was always awkward. And so I'm glad we'll have more options for families downtown who are enjoying downtown with their kids.
Anything further?
Madam
Yes,
Mayor?
Councilmember Willetts, go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks to everyone who came tonight. It's great to see civic discourse and something like this. And I think we've all learned a lot of things. Couple of things I think are worth noting and worth reiterating. One is that the city has the authority to do this. And the only reason that it's here is because it's a historic issue. And to some of the other council members' comments, we've heard over and over again that folks want bathrooms, and we've had work sessions on that and the importance of bathrooms as a basic human need. A couple of things came to mind as I was listening to the different testimonies, and one is that this is such a sticky wicket because it's in a historic park, but there's some conversation that it's not a historic park. And what does that really mean? Because it was generated by some historic artifacts that are in this park. At the end of the day, it's deemed a historic park. I do think that the design and the location is arbitrary based on one thing, and that's the fact that there's a federal grant. Because of that, I think it makes it a different conversation than had there been something else. I'm going to vote no, but I want to make it clear that I think we need more bathrooms and not less. And in this case, I think that there could have been some more options that were considered, but the grant tied our hands. Thank you.
All right, clerk, will you call the roll?
Stead,
Yes.
Willetts,
No,
Bajent,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
Haney,
Yes.
Nash,
Yes.
5 in favor, 1 opposed, motion carries.
And I just want to confirm that staff got the findings piece. Great. All right. With that, we are going to take a bathroom break. All righty. Welcome back, everybody. Now we'll head back to the other topic, DRH 2333. We've got all the parties involved in the room now. So we'll go ahead. We'll hear from Josh, then John Marshall for the appellant. Then are you Ryan? I didn't introduce myself when I said hi. For the applicant. The neighborhood association is not here. And then we'll hear from other members of the public that are here to testify.
Madam Mayor,
Oh, who's that?
sorry, that's
Oh,
me.
Yeah.
I, sorry. So I was waiting for my.
I think the
second to jump
volume
in.
went up again. So
Yeah, it's okay. I'm gonna recuse from this item because of the work I did with planning and zoning, just in an abundance of caution.
great. Thank you. Okay, Josh.
All right, thank you, Madam Mayor. The item before you is a appeal of the Planning and Zoning Commission's decision to deny the appeal of a design review committee approval, which modified the conditions of approval for a multi-use residential building under construction currently in downtown Boise. So the site is addressed at 120 North 12th Street at the southeast corner of 12th and Idaho, generally behind the Record Exchange building. The approved design review project is a 26-story mixed-use building, 6 levels of parking, approximately 300 residential units with access off of the alley and off of Idaho Street. It is directly adjacent to the Royal Plaza, which is a residential structure which was built some time ago in Boise. A rendering of the proposed project just showing it is certainly a very large and very tall structure. Again, 26 stories and a significant addition to downtown. So as part of that 2021 Design Review Committee approval, we included a standard condition for construction activity. And it reads as, construction activity on site is restricted to the hours of 6:30 a.m. to 6 p.m. Mondays through Fridays, and 8:30 a.m. to 6 p.m. on Saturdays and Sundays. The zoning code does not address hours of construction. We use a standard condition of approval on design review permits, conditional use permits, any action that goes through some of our commissions and committees for entitlement on these projects in order to attempt to mitigate construction activities for adjacent properties. This project was approved in 2021. We have since revised this condition to be more comprehensive. It talks about what sort of activities are allowed outside of these hours, activities within enclosed floors, things that don't make noise like surveying, painting, stuff like that is allowed at any time. And then we also added a clause that allows the director to temporarily waive these hours in very specific circumstances. So really the intent of these conditions is to mitigate noise impacts on adjacent properties on a case-by-case basis. In 2021, this is the condition that we placed on properties. So when
So Josh, I've got a
Yeah,
question
sure.
just in general. So this started 6 months ago and there's 6 months to go. Have they been pouring concrete at 4 o'clock and it's just that the appeal is making its way up now?
Madam Mayor, I believe you'll hear some testimony on that. I've heard conflicting reports about what sort of activity is going on outside of these hours. I believe they have the letter of the law would say they do not conduct activity outside of these hours until the appeal process is complete.
Gotcha. Okay.
yeah.
All right.
So when the design review committee took up the application and made their decision, they did approve the applicant's request, but with some specific parameters around those concrete pouring activities. So they stipulated that on specific days, they can start at 4 a.m., but they have to provide a monthly schedule for the neighbors that would be distributed, and then provide a 3-day notice if that schedule is going to change. After that decision was rendered by the design review committee, we did receive an appeal by the Royal Master Owners Association, which is again is that residential project next door to the site. That appeal was heard by Planning and Zoning Commission on June 5th, and that appeal was denied. So subsequently, an appeal of that decision was submitted, and now tonight we are here with the appeal before you. So the grounds that were submitted by the appellant are that neither the P&Z nor design review have articulated any standard by which they have reviewed the request. The rationale for approving the request and denial of the appeal are inconsistent with the applicant's testimony. The committee and commission did not properly weigh the impact of the change on the neighboring residents, and the decision on the application is a public policy question that needs to be addressed by City Council. So in their deliberations and consideration, Planning and Zoning Commission did take some additional public testimony. They considered the design review committee's decision and the record that the design review committee made that decision on. Ultimately, the Planning and Zoning Commission empathized with the residents and the disruption that this is, but felt that it was a justified and necessary exception to the work hours, and therefore denied the appeal. As evidenced by the record, the design review committee was within its jurisdictional authority to change the conditions of approval on the design review permit. We do not have standards in ordinance regarding construction hours, so it is discretionary and it is on a case-by-case basis. And the design review committee was certainly within their, again, purview and authority in making that decision. We recommend that City Council deny the appeal, upholding the design review committee's decision and their modified conditions of approval. Again, we would ask that any motion includes direction to staff to come back to council with revised findings for adoption at a future public hearing. And with that, I will stand for any questions.
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
We have a standard condition that gives hours in which construction can take place. It feels like that condition exists to balance some harms to the neighbors on one hand, burden to the construction on the other hand. And the request that we're reviewing had to do with changing those conditions. In my mind, that means that our job or planning and zoning's job was to rebalance the harms. In other words, look at, well, here's the nature of what's going on in the construction. This is why it's even more necessary. It's obviously going to be more harmful to start earlier to the neighbors, but here's why, like in my mind, that's the test to be used. But nobody seems to really clearly be articulating that test anywhere here. The applicant's not, the appellant is not. Like,
yeah.
What is the framework that decision was supposed to have been made in?
Madam Mayor, Council Pro Tem Bajent, the framework for any design review decision is number one, the design review standards and guidelines, and then number two, Boise Sydney ordinance in terms of the required findings for the design review committee. Neither one of those really address this. So it is very much a difficult area to decide. Conditional use permits certainly have standards about impacts on adjacent properties, and that review process takes those into account. Design review is very much focused on how projects comply with the design review guidelines, which again, do not mention construction hours at all. So, this standard condition of approval is an attempt, I think, as you said, to mitigate some of these impacts on adjacent properties. I think it's a difficult one to articulate about how do we review this. What is the standard for review? I think is a little bit up in the air.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Josh. All right, come on up.
Just by way of quick introduction to our proposal here. So the appellant is the Royal Master Owners Association. It's not me. And I, as a owner and a board member, and Tiffany also is a board member, and like the previous protest or appellant, we would like to split our testimony and have Tiffany speak just a little bit, and then I will speak a little bit as well, if that's okay.
Oh, yeah, that's great. But then you all are speaking as the appellant and not as individuals coming up a second time.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
Great. All right. Thanks.
And we'll have Tiffany go first.
And then you're Tiffany. Great. And then the timer will start and then I'll just have you two manage it. Okay.
Good evening. My name's Tiffany Pennicard. I live at 1112 West Main Street in Suite 603 at the Royal Plaza. Thank you for having me. Madam Mayor and council members, we were here a couple months ago and we heard the applicant talk about having to be here or having to work at 4 a.m. 1 day a week. Number one, it's not 1 day a week. It was at 3 o'clock. It was at 3:30. It was, and I'm going to play you how loud it is for a couple months. Now, up until recently, they really have, and I thank them for this, tried to be closer to the 6:30 timeframe. But I just want you to put yourselves in our shoes, and I'm going to play you the noise that I get woken up by my husband and I. I don't need an alarm clock. It's 6:15, sometimes 6, sometimes 6:30 every single morning. And I just want to play that for you. And then I want you to think about your parents being there, because my next door neighbor has a very ill husband that's home all day long. And we get it from 6:30 to 6. We're going to hear this all day long. I get to leave. My husband has to stay home and work, but the neighbors below me, the neighbors beside me, one has dementia, the other one Alzheimer's, and they have to listen to this and be woken up all day long. And they're requesting 4 a.m, and it's more than 1 day a week. So I just want to play this. This was yesterday morning. And this is mild, all day long. And then this was just a couple minutes later. Maybe I can get the phone to work. No. Just 1 second. And that is what we get to listen to at 4 a.m. That's what they're wanting to do. But we do get woken up no matter what, every single morning at between 6:30, around that time frame. And we hear that and hear it. And my neighbors and the elderly in our community, in the Royal Plaza, it's tough. And at the 4 o'clock time frame, we're only allowed 10 hours of peace. 10 hours of peace, even at the 4 o'clock time frame. And that's just it's not fair. I get to leave in the daytime, but the majority of the owners of the Royal Plaza are there. And we promote growth. I'm a real estate agent. I promote it. I love it. I love downtown. That's why I moved here. But I'm just begging you to please just, it's not a safety issue. It's not a 1 day a week. It is every day. And at the P&Z meeting, they did promise to keep the rules. And the first couple months, I emailed the planning and zoning person. I was kind of put in charge of emailing every time we heard something in behalf of our neighbors. And it was difficult just to get a response on, I don't think anybody he said, it's such a gray area, but I'm begging you to listen to us and listen to what we have to hear. And we deserve some peace, just a few hours of peace and some sleep. So thank you.
John Marshall, address is 1112 West Main, number 504. Again, here on behalf of the Royal Plaza Masters Owners Association, continuing the testimony of the appellant. I would like to take the remaining time to talk a little bit about balancing interest. I appreciate very much what Council Pro Tem Badgett had to say in terms of kind of wrestling with what actually are we doing here this evening and how do we do it? And I think Tiffany did a good job of explaining one interest, which is the homeowner's interest, which is wanting to peacefully enjoy our homes at some level. Now, we all understand there's construction, we live downtown, and as Tiffany said, we appreciate the opportunity to be downtown and recognize there's some externalities that go along with that. And we appreciated and did not oppose that 6:30 start time, the 6:30 a.m. to 6 p.m. window of construction, which, you know, if we could have our way, we wouldn't have that, but we get that. That's reasonable. And we think that did the appropriate job of balancing the interest between homeowners enjoying their existing homes and contractor needing to get a building built. The current request is something new. It's to take the existing balance and change it and ask the homeowners or ask the council to put the homeowners in a position where at least once a week, the start time would be 4 a.m. as has been stated. And as I hope the record makes clear, the impact of that 4 a.m. start time with the amount of noise this project generates is significant to the point where the people, particularly on the north side of the building, that are really an alleyway adjacent from this construction project, really you just can't sleep. It's so noisy. And again, 6:30, that's early enough, but so be it. But the request to start at 4 really is putting a very significant burden on the homeowners. And so then we have to ask, well, what's on balance, what is gained from that? And what the applicant said when they made their request to change from 6:30 to 4 a.m. start time is they said one thing. They said, we want to avoid having heavy trucks, concrete trucks on the roads during high traffic times. Sounds like a good public safety rationale for wanting to make a change. Well, as the record is developed, it's clear that that's actually not going to happen in the sense of starting at 4 is not going to keep heavy trucks off the roads, because as the testimony has played out, what happens is during these concrete pours, the trucks come in every 10 minutes or so for hours on end to keep a constant flow of concrete going. And so you start at 4, but you have concrete trucks on the streets all through the heavy rush hour traffic. So the stated purpose for what the applicant said is the reason for making the change hasn't played out in the record. And what has happened is the testimony's gone forward, including some from staff and also some from the applicant, is this idea that, well, it's actually more convenient for us to build our building the way we're building it if we can pour a single floor at a time. And on some occasions, it's unclear to me if it's hot weather or cold weather, we've heard both. On some occasions, they can't get a full pour done on a single day. And when that happens, the remedy is that you take a floor and you pour it over 2 days. Nothing structurally wrong with that. We've heard nothing other than just a little less convenient, maybe a little more costly. And so what we have is we have these two competing interests. On the one hand, what you really have is as a developer, a contractor who wants to appropriately build this building as fast as they can, as economically as they can. But there's nothing about what they've proposed that's necessary. It's just convenience. And we're on floor 14. And as we've talked about a little bit tonight, the start time is 6:30. And during this appeal, the start time is held at 6:30. There's been a little ambiguity this summer with whether or not we actually got to go to 4, and we had to work that out. And it's been made clear that it's 6:30. And so of the 14 floors, I couldn't tell you how many got built during that window when maybe we're able to start at 4, actually a little earlier than 4 as it turns out. But for the most part, it's clear just from the reality of what we see out there, these folks are able to build this building with a 6:30 to 6 p.m. window. 4 a.m. is convenient, but not necessary. It's not necessary for public safety, nor is it necessary for building integrity. It's just a matter of convenience. And again, on balance, what you're asking for, or the opposing interest is homeowners of existing homes who can't get a good night's sleep on those days because the banging and the loud noises and the beeping all starts at 4 a.m., which is in our opinion, and our request to you was to say that's not an appropriate balancing of interest. The existing standards, 6:30 to 6 p.m. weekdays, is a really good balance between getting this project built, a great project for Boise, and also respecting the interests of the existing homeowners and their ability to want to sleep through the night and just enjoy their homes. I don't think I need to add anything else at this point. I'll stand for any questions or I'll reserve the rest of my time for rebuttal.
Madam Mayor.
You'll get 5 minutes for rebuttal at the
Okay.
end.
Yeah. Question and a comment. I guess I'll start with comment. Sorry about the loud noise. That is terrible. My partner, her cell phone in the morning, it goes off because she always wants to wake up early, and then she hits snooze like 10 different times. And if I didn't love her so much, I would lose my mind. And it's nothing compared to remotely to the sound that you're going through. It sounds absolutely terrible. I get one of the things I guess I'm hearing you say is that maybe I think I'm hearing you say that you're not opposed to them starting early as long as it's quiet. So like if they're at their 4 a.m. in the morning and it is painting walls and it's not pouring concrete or hammering spikes on the ground, you're not necessarily opposed to that. You're opposed to any loud noises that are starting at 6:30. And you're kind of saying, I'm willing to deal with the terrible noises starting at 6:30 as long as before those noises are not non-existent. You can't tell that they're there. Is that correct?
I'm gonna look at my co-testifier here and make sure we're on the same page, but I mean, yeah, so Tiffany was speaking and echoing exactly what I would have said in answer to that question, which is it's not a philosophical issue about starting at 4. It's purely the noise issue. And when Mr. Wilson was talking about how there's some flexibility in the new way the ordinance, not the ordinance, but that condition is written, where there's flexibility to do things inside a shell, great. Like no opposition to people being there at 4, working at 4. Just please don't make it so that we have to have bright lights, heavy duty noises that wake us up.
And Madam Mayor, just a quick follow-up. I think you're also saying that you don't think that concrete can be poured from big trucks in a way that's quiet enough.
From
It's impossible. That's a leading question. I
and
apologize for it.
I apologize as well. I'm not
Yeah.
following the formalities in terms of addressing you following questions. I
Don't
apologize for that.
worry. Yeah.
But in my experience with heavy concrete based steel construction is 6 months. And there is absolutely no way you can do what they're doing and be quiet. And there's no way.
Okay.
It's
Thank
very,
you.
very loud.
Madam Mayor, I had a question about the six o'clock end time. I mean, I'd much rather construction go until 8 than start at 4. Has that been a discussion at all?
Madam Mayor, council members, there was some discussion about that at the P&Z deliberation. It's never been proposed to us. In fact, nothing's been proposed to us either by staff or by the applicant, which I guess is a little frustrating, but we're not saying that's required or anything. But yes, to directly answer your question, would we rather have the work go later versus earlier? Yes. Would we rather it stay 6:30 to 6? Yes. Are there evenings when it goes past 6? Yes. Are our neighbors calling that in to code enforcement? I don't think so, because it's just not the same level of intensity of interruption. But that would be preferable than a 4 a.m. start.
Yeah, I would just ask all the parties testifying to speak to that if they could.
Madam Mayor, I've got a question for staff, if I could, real quick. Josh, do you have it? Thank you. So I guess my question, when you were presenting sort of at the beginning, you sort of explained why there was maybe some changes that would allow an earlier start time. And I guess when you were saying it, I think you mentioned something specifically like painting, but I think that you also had mentioned other kind of construction duties that aren't interruptive or have loud noises. Maybe I'm putting words into your mouth, but could you either pull that up or kind of restate the intention of that earlier start time?
Absolutely, Madam Mayor, Council President Halliburton. So we have, we've had a few of these issues come up over the past 24 or so months. One went to Planning and Zoning Commission that didn't get appealed to council. And then also you're probably aware St. Luke's had a major concrete pour that got some extended hours. So this is something that we've been aware of and working on. I've thrown on the screen here the new condition that we use. I'll just read it verbatim. So to reduce the noise impact of construction activity or construction on nearby residential properties, all exterior construction activities shall be limited to hours between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. Monday through Friday, and 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. for Saturday and Sunday, unless otherwise approved by the planning director for temporary construction activity. Low noise impacts such as surveying, layout, and weather protection may be performed at any time. After each floor of the structure or building is enclosed with exterior walls and windows, interior construction of the enclosed floors can be performed at any time. So that was our attempt. And we've been, again, this design review was approved in 2021. We've been using this condition for about a year now in response to some of the problems we ran into the old condition.
So did you have a follow-up?
Go for it.
So I've got a question about that. So this one is 6:30 to 6. The language up there says 7 to 7 but I also see that the planning director can approve changes for temporary activity. So if the planning director were to approve a change, say from 7 to 7 to 4 to 6, would that then come back to us? Or is this new language that gives the planning director more oversight than he has currently?
Madam Mayor, yes.
Okay.
It does give the planning director more oversight than currently.
And then what do we do for weather? So I hear you on the noise. Like we live next to Longfellow School that was under construction for 2 years. It just finished. And I got to tell you, now that it's over and we hear the sounds of kids, we've all forgotten what it was like to live through it. Memory short, but it's rough our windows face right onto where all the trucks would show and everything. And I get it. It's a lot. And the longer it goes on, the harder it gets to tolerate. But, one of the reasons that folks would show up so early was the heat issues. So does that become, with this language, the planning director's discretion in conversation with contractors for weather? Because I'd much rather it be at the end of the day too, but in the summer, it's hellaciously hot. And I think that's why, at least at the site next to me, everybody was gone by a certain hour in the afternoon because they were there in the mornings.
Madam Mayor, the heat issue, I think the way that this condition is worded does specifically speak to a temporary construction activity.
And that would be covered by heat, or like if somebody.
I think
came
that
in
argument
for-
could be made that extreme summer heat is a temporary condition. Yeah, but it does give the planning director pretty broad authority to change the hours, certainly.
The typical language before this was proposed was 6 to 6.
It was, I want to not get this wrong. It
I just
was
remember from my planning and zoning days, there were definitely requests
certainly.
for changes by neighbors in particular based on the timing.
So the language before that the initial approval had in place was 6:30 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday, 8:30 a.m. to 6 p.m. Saturday and Sunday.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I have a question for Josh. Josh, I'm looking through on the condition of approval that the activities may begin at 4 a.m., but that the applicant had to provide a monthly schedule on the pour days to planning and development and to the stakeholders. Did that occur?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Willis, that did not, because this condition is really not in effect until the appeal process is exhausted. So technically they haven't been able to start at 4 a.m. So no, this has not taken place yet.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, one follow-up question, just to make sure that I'm reading this right. The first part of this statement basically is what has given our director the ability to approve that temporary construction. And that's both the 6:30 time period, but then also maybe this additional earlier start time on other days. The second part of this, the low noise impact activities, all those types of things, those can happen no matter what at any time without actual approval, or those need approval as well?
Madam Mayor, Council President Halliburton. So under that old condition, really, it did technically prohibit all construction activity outside of those hours. So you couldn't even do anything that was noise free. So that's why we felt the need to revise the condition.
Madam Mayor. I appreciate this language, I really do, but I guess I'm maybe wanting to circle back to, we have to look at the reason for the decision that was made in this particular case. And as I understand it, it's really been focused on the traffic issue that I think was raised, and then also the ability to pour in one stage, single slabs as opposed to two pours. And I guess I'm just curious about, what has been, and I guess maybe third to that is that part of the argument is that they need that earlier time in order to, they'll shorten the overall period of time of all this noise and concrete pouring if they're able to do this. And I guess I'd just like some education on if all that's true, how much shorter is that? And given that they haven't been able to do this since this appeal process, where are they in their build? That is this actually something necessary at this point going forward?
I wonder if those aren't questions the applicant.
Okay.
Are you able to
Either
answer
way, I'm
those, or do
happy
you
to
want
answer,
Josh?
ask it either way. I just wanted
Madam
to.
Mayor, no, I am not able to answer that. So
Yeah.
applicant,
Okay,
yeah.
I will.
I would
Please
expect
address
that
that.
that's part of the applicant's testimony.
That would be great. Thank
Anything
you.
else for the appellant? Great. Come on up, sir.
Good evening. I'm Ryan Hager, the applicant.
Good evening. Welcome.
Thank you for your time. I'm the superintendent for the subcontractor performing all of the concrete activity at the 12th and Idaho project. We've requested an earlier start time than what's prescribed in the building permit. We've requested 4 a.m. starts with the intent to use the earlier hours for large placements. I understand the current start time is 6:30, and the 4:30 start would only be for placing concrete on large concrete placements. So once a week for the next 3 or 4 months or so, we have about 500-yard concrete placements. We pour the deck, the core, and all the columns in one day. And then we move on to the next deck. And then each week we're going up one level. With the 50 trucks or more going in and out of the job site, 40-ish of those are coming in at like a 5 to 8 minute spacing. So they're in, they're dumping their concrete, and they're out. It's chaos. It's a lot of like coordinated chaos on a concrete pour. The larger truck traffic will dissipate earlier in the day. Usually takes 4 to 5 hours to pump out at the deck, which is taking, that's when you get a lot of those mixer trucks coming in, filing in. So I apologize for the loud activity. We've had issues with some of our subcontractors. Not aware of our employees working at 3:30 in the morning, but we made changes with the subcontractor, and I apologize for all the noise we make outside this work times. We put it into it as best we could. Yeah, I hope there's been some change. I understand that the Royal Plaza's concern for the noise earlier in the day, but our request to start early, it reduces the impact on neighboring businesses. It improves public safety, and it reduces the risk of poor quality concrete. poor quality with lack of concrete service. Enabling us to start early placements in the day will alleviate traffic congestion caused by construction activity. So, I mean, the appellant alluded to the fact that we're going on it. I mean, we're taking 4 or 5 hours, or I guess 12 hours to pour out all these levels with the decks and then the elevated columns and core. It does take about 12 hours to pour the whole thing, but the big, like heavy traffic time, it takes about 4 hours, 4 to 5 hours. Getting trucks off the road as soon as possible is the best thing we can do for everybody in the neighborhood, including businesses nearby that, I mean, the construction's a nuisance, and mixer trucks, and pedestrians and public traffic don't mix well. Like especially when they're backing out and trying to drive down the road as fast as they can so they can go get their truck filled up again to come right back. It's a recipe for people to get hurt, I believe. The project schedule with the earlier start in the day, we're able to start construction activity for the next level that afternoon. In the summer, there was usually the concrete takes off fast enough that you can continue work, like you can work on it by like noon-ish if you started at 6:30. As we get into the cooler months, that time that it takes for that concrete to get its initial cure so you can keep going and work the schedule that we've been given by an owner. It requires us to start earlier in the day to get on it within enough time to start the next forming operation. And I guess the early morning start, later morning starts, they impede the delivery of concrete with traffic on the road. Our suppliers, they tell us it's hard to get concrete to us, and it's hard to get the building built without getting service. We've lined up, I mean, we have our placements scheduled with our supplier probably at this point. Well, I mean, we're 3 or 4 months in advance right now. And they're always asking us, can you go earlier? Can you go earlier? Can you go earlier? Because their driver's time out. And then we can't get service. I think there was a question that the whole building could be done in 2 pours. That's possible. Yeah. But it's not, I guess, with a floor plate that size, it just doesn't make sense to do it in 2 pours. We did, like in the ramping, the garage parts, you'd notice we'd pour up to the adjacent previously poured deck. And it was, that's just because you're following yourself up the ramp, corkscrewing up a ramp. With these just flat elevated decks, just the floor plate, the size it's not cost effective. And then it would add more time to our schedule, which is not cost effective. That's about all I have. I appreciate your time, and would hope that you guys allow us to alter our work hours.
Madam Mayor, can you give us a sense if it does start at 4, like how long of a period is that going to be? You said it's going to be once a week. You'll do
Once
a
a week.
4 a.m. or 4:30 pour, whatever we're talking about, once a week. And then how much time does that shave off of if you were to stay at the 6:30 in terms of your pour?
Does it
That
shave
day?
any time at all?
That
on-
day,
on the bill?
like,
Nope, I
or
mean,
over the course of the project.
course of the project,
I could,
the length of the noise.
5-10 days.
Madam Mayor, I'm going to ask that kind of same question and maybe just a slightly different way. How many days are you requesting to start at 4 a.m. total?
14.
14.
Well, or at the beginning,
So
at
I
the
want to know
beginning
how,
of the appeal, or at this point,
yeah, no, starting today.
starting today.
I want to know, yeah, if we say like, yes, you're going to do this, how many days are you going to be requesting?
No more than 15.
15 days, and you're doing it once a week, Madam Mayor, and you're doing it once a week.
Yeah.
So, and Madam Mayor, the last follow-up question there. So we might expect then, and I know that construction doesn't always go exactly the way that timing is supposed to be. I used to do construction. Somebody might expect that once a week for the next 14 weeks, that there'll be a 4 a.m. start date
Mhm.
and probably be pouring for 12 straight hours.
Mhm.
And that's a realistic expectation.
Yes.
Is that because you're trying to pour, you only need to do it once a week because you all are building pretty much one floor a week? So you pour it and then you
Exactly.
spend the next week working on the floor and then you pour another one.
Exactly.
Okay.
Madam Mayor. Sounds like you need 12 hours. You prefer the morning hours. Can you do an entire floor if you had 14 hours between 6 a.m. and 8 p.m.?
Yeah, I mean, so from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m.
6 a.m. to 8 p.m.
6 a.m. to 8 p.m.
I understand you prefer morning, but can you do an
Yeah.
entire floor in 14 hours if it's those hours?
What the problem is for us generally is the truck service later in the day. If like building this bigger building, we're doing a deck a week. Basically the drivers time out later in the day. It's usually around 4:30 or 5 o'clock. So that they're always asking us, can you go earlier? Because they've got other smaller jobs they try to do in the afternoons, but it's always, can you go earlier from the supplier? And for us, it helps so that we can get on the deck earlier in the day. During the summer months, safety, like heat illness, that's a big concern in the construction industry, is heat illness. So starting early in the morning makes sense. A lot of guys would rather work from 4 till 3 instead of like 8 or 6:30 to 5, because after 2 o'clock it's extremely hot. And then I guess the other early work, we started this in May, I think, this process. And we were looking forward to extreme summer temperatures. Starting earlier in the day, pouring concrete, it reduces the amount of, well, it helps control the curing time of the decks we're pouring, concrete we're pouring, and provides a better quality product for an owner. I think starting at 6, going from 6 to 8, we would much appreciate that. If the 4 a.m., I mean, I don't envy you. I don't live downtown, but for a reason, but I don't envy you living next door to a job like this. It's loud. I understand that. So, I mean, if it's from 6 to 8, yeah, we could make that work.
What are you doing now since you haven't been able to start at 4
Starting at 6:30.
and then pouring over 2 days?
No, it's a single day deal, but we've been working past 6.
Gotcha.
The work hours. We have been working up until about 8.
Okay.
Madam Mayor.
By the way,
a lot of times when we change conditions, it's because a condition out in the world has changed. We
Mhm.
might say you can build an addition to your house, but you have to preserve this tree. And then lightning strikes the tree and it falls down, and somebody will come back and say, hey, maybe get rid of the condition about preserving the tree because the conditions have changed. Here, it doesn't sound like any condition has changed.
Mhm.
Like you knew the pour schedule, you knew the traffic issues, you knew the concrete trucks needs and timelines. Like, am I right that there's no change in circumstances from when you originally accepted this condition?
Y- yeah, I guess you're right. We appealed made this appeal to change the work hours based on our mine and several of my coworkers' experience working in larger metropolitan areas where there is an opportunity to go to it's usually not planning and zoning. I think it's been the building department. Or no, it might have been the roads. I can't remember who did the noise ordinance, but it was not through planning and zoning. And we definitely didn't do appeals processes. It was like we turned in a piece of paper and $200 and said, can we pour at 6 o'clock? And usually, I mean, the concrete service in a larger metropolitan area is much better than it is here. So we didn't ever really have to start earlier than 6, and it was much more mild. It was in Seattle, much more mild climate.
Yeah, I guess my question, and I think you answered it, but it's not so much that, for instance, a bunch of streets have closed and now it's really hard to get into the site, or lightning struck your building and you've got to do, like, nothing has actually changed. It's just that throughout working on this job, you and your colleagues have come to the conclusion that it'd be much better to do it in a different way, and you're asking for permission to do that.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, last question. I'm just curious if we are comfortable with a 4 a.m. start once a week, is there another compromise with the residents to limit the noise on other days, like later starts for a couple of days? I mean, is there something else once you pour, you've got other work that you have to do? Is there something else that limits that noise if they're going to do an early start once a week? Is there something else so that they're not just adding to another 2 hours? Or any alternatives that were brought forth?
We didn't bring any alternatives. Reason being is we want to get these placements done and over with early in the day so that we don't have vehicles and pedestrians. It was the quality issue. And then, I mean, our impact on neighboring businesses. That was kind of the reason for the 4 a.m. and start. And there was no other. This would seem like the best venue that we could find through trying to alter the work hours because they're prescribed in the permit. But we could, I mean, I would like to, if a 4 a.m. start is not something that, I mean, it sounds like people can't get behind. I'd like to find something that we can get behind, something better than 6:30 to 6.
Well, Madam Mayor, I'm sorry, this has been my last question, but I guess what it'd be helpful to hear from you is the bare minimum that you can work with.
Bare minimum would be, I mean, once a week, ideally starting at 5:30 and going till 6 or later.
That's thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we've got some members of the public here to testify. Just here to watch. Should have brought some popcorn and next time. All right, I just want to make sure nobody is here or online to testify. All right, let's go ahead and hear rebuttals. You've heard the questions council's asked. Some proposals on the table.
Couple of just quick things to just to kind of wrap up. I don't need to repeat what I think everyone's probably got a pretty good handle on this now. And the competing interests, I think, are very well stated. I do want to say I appreciate the apology. That's well received. Thank you. And I also want to acknowledge two things. One is it has gotten better. There was a time this summer where there was work starting before 4, even though the 4 a.m. hadn't been approved. And there was some tension there, and that's all gotten better as indicated. So we appreciate that. I also want to make it clear that we are, at least from the association perspective, a fan of this building, of this project. We think it's going to be a wonderful addition to Boise. So we're not against the construction. We're not against McIlvain. We're not against power construction. We just don't want to have that 4 a.m. start time. One thing I did want to at least address on this question, Council Member Keith, you had raised with regard to kind of getting at, would it be faster getting this over with by having 4 a.m. start times? What I'm hearing from the testimony is there's some days when they can get it done with 6:30 to 6. Some days, maybe it's when it's cooler, they need a little longer window. From our perspective, if it's a few more days of concrete pours, so they have to split one into two, or let's stay there for now. They split one into two. We would much rather have 5-10 extra days of construction on a 2-year project than 4 a.m. start times during the build of the actual structure. So from our perspective, very much would prefer no 4 a.m. start time, a few more extra days of work. The other thing I want to address is as we're talking through this a little bit and hearing the testimony from the applicant, we want to be good neighbors, just like we want McIlvain to be good neighbors to us. And if there's a proposal that we could work out collectively here to say 6:30 to 8 once a week to give them the time frame they needed. I get, again, it's not ideal from what they're saying, but on balance, it seems like that'd be a pretty good compromise where we're not having to get woken up at 4. It's not quite as convenient to get the trucks in there, but they've still had the time they need to get a single floor deck poured. I don't think you're going to hear any opposition from us about shifting that longer day on the pour day to a 6:30 to 8 p.m. end time. Yes, so just to emphasize the actual appeal is a 4 a.m. start time for concrete pours. That's a 1-day event on, but the background is that every single day starting at 6:30, bang, bang, bang lights. It's very noisy. So it's an added burden. And again, the burden from 6:30 to 6, we get it. That's the way it goes. But it's that 4 a.m. start time that we're asking you to say no to. Happy to answer any further questions if anyone has any.
Thank you
Thank you.
very much. All right, with that, I'll close the.
Madam Mayor, I've got
Oh.
a question for staff.
Oh, great.
So in the memo that we got from staff, there's kind of a bunch of different grounds where they appealed. The second one, the rationale for approving the request and denial of the appeal are inconsistent with the applicant's testimony. And then the response is that about the shorter hours. I guess, one thing that I couldn't quite wrap my head around as far as consistency goes is it kind of seemed like we were pouring for 12 hours. Right now, we were kind of starting a little bit later and going a little bit later. And it didn't really seem like there was necessarily a specific, like absolute, it has to be started at 4. I mean, there were certainly some reasons, and definitely in the summertime, heat being one of those. It's kind of not where we're at right now. And so that's, I guess, sort of a response that I'm seeing, that there are perhaps some inconsistencies in that we are saying that, yes, a shorter time would be a challenge, but it's not necessarily saying a specific time frame has to happen, whether it's 12 hours that starts at 4 a.m. or 6 a.m.
Madam Mayor, Council President Halliburton, I would say that with the heat of the summer past, I think circumstances have certainly changed. You just point that out. I think, and the applicant addressed that as well. I think we're looking at a different scenario now in terms of working later, possibly working. I think he also admitted that maybe they weren't stopping at 6 p.m. So, cheating the hours a little bit that way to accomplish it so far. So, correct. Yes, I think there has been some inconsistencies about how long does this actually take. I think, really dialing into it tonight about like, well, now that the heat of summer has passed, these later hours could be something that they could work with, I think is helpful clarification, I think certainly for staff and for council as well.
And Madam Mayor, I have kind of a process follow-up question here. So we've got an appeal in front of us. And I'm wondering, as far as paths forward, if we were going to change time, is that something that we have the authority to do? Up here, it says that the planning director has the authority to do. Do we direct the planning director to do something? Do we, like, what are our options here if we were wanting to explore a different time period?
Madam Mayor, Council President Halliburton, I would direct you to the last page of the staff memo. It talks about the grounds for appeal and then council's ability to change the decision. So it says, if error is found, the review body decision may be reversed or modified. That modification could include a change to conditions of approval, as we've talked about tonight.
Yep.
Any further questions? All right, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing.
Madam Mayor, I think maybe before a motion's made, I might just have a couple comments. Nobody wants to get up at 4 a.m. in the morning or be woken up at 4 a.m. in the morning. You do. Even if you're one of those folks who get up in the morning, like the mayor, and go for a run or go to the gym, like nobody's getting up at 4 a.m. in the morning. Like that is pure punishment. The workers, absolutely. Well, and so many workers, but I guarantee you they don't want to. And given a choice, they would probably choose to not be getting up at 4 a.m. in the morning. And so I think that there's a workaround here. I don't know that it's 6 a.m. instead of 5:30 a.m. or like how you actually get to the point where you find that period of time. But I'm not at a spot where 4 a.m. makes a lot of sense for any resident to be interrupted by construction.
Madam Mayor, just a quick question for Council President Halliburton. I guess the question would be, if there's a workaround, can you identify an error?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, I think the error that I would identify was that yes, I can find it. On the appeal grounds of number 2, the rationale approving the request and the denial of appeal are inconsistent with the applicant's testimony. I do think the applicant was inconsistent with the testimony, saying that here it's saying that they only really considered the shortening of the period of time, but not necessarily the different times throughout the day. And I think that we heard, a couple of different points saying that, like, yes, we might be able to do it later in the day. It would be better to do it earlier in the morning, but nothing that would say that we actually, nothing that we can't actually get done in a 12-hour period of time, depending on if it starts in a different spot. And so I don't think that is consistent with the applicant's testimony. So I think that would be the grounds where we would find the error.
I'm going to suggest that a motion be put on the floor.
Madam Mayor, I move that we uphold the appeal and that we direct staff to different hours, starting at 5:30 a.m. and not exceeding over 12 hours in a day.
I would second that if the motion maker would consider 6 to 8. We have testimony. We have testimony asking us for 6:30. We have testimony asking us for 5:30. I feel like it splits the baby. Giving them a 14-hour window allows them to do a 12-hour pour once a week.
Yeah, I think that like constraining it to 12 hours and 14 hours makes sense. I do think that giving them an earlier start time does give them some advantages to getting things done a little bit earlier. But yeah, I would say no earlier than 5:30 and no more than 14 hours a day.
Feel like we're negotiating on the price of a house. 14 hours, that put them at 7:30. I'll second the motion.
And Madam Mayor, I think I said all the things that, is kind of had on my mind earlier. I want to get this construction project done as soon as possible. And I think that that's important. I don't want to add extra obstacles to the construction company. I want to give them a window of time to get those things done. I think if it was the summertime, certainly there's a really hard argument to be made for getting things started earlier in the day. I don't know that we're at that same spot. So those are some of the conditions that have changed. I also completely understand, even at 6:30 a.m. or 6 a.m., we certainly have, an issue that's really, really hard for the neighbors to deal with. But we do want to get it done as fast as we possibly can. I think 5:30 a.m., given the proper notice that is required in here, 1 day a week, is something that if it can help it move along a little bit faster, that, is something that's better than nothing, and something that can get the project done at the same time period that we want to. I do think that there was an error that was made, really not considering the ability to go to a different time, but really only looking at from a point of view of we're either going to go for a smaller window or a 4 a.m. start time. And I don't think it was adequately considered that we actually look at a slightly later start time that incorporates the longer hour for pouring that actually achieves, the goals of, what was intended.
So a couple of things. Did your motion direct staff to return with findings?
And to return with findings, including a 5:30 a.m. start time and no later than 14 with the reasons discussed, and to come back with those for council approval.
And did your, are the other elements that were discussed, the calendar that has to be provided, the stakeholders, all that, are those separate conditions? Or do they need to be part of this condition?
Madam Mayor, they were included in one condition, so this condition should encompass all of those items.
So is your intention, Council President, to amend the condition with the hours, but keep all the other requirements within the condition?
To amend the hours from 4 a.m. to 5:30 a.m. to also include a maximum limit of 14 hours per day, and to include everything else that is in the conditions, including the notification 3 days prior.
Does the
Madam
seconder
Mayor?
agree? I just have to make sure the seconder agrees.
He concurs.
Okay.
I have a question, just to make sure, when we say the 14 hours a day, that's on the day of concrete pour, not,
Those are on the days of concrete pour and the days that will be notified to neighbors, as listed in the existing condition that's on here, really the time being modified.
Discussion?
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I won't be joining the motion because I can't find the error. We can only modify if we have an error. Conflicting testimony isn't in the appeal standards. We have to find it was either made without a rational basis, which there's a rational basis here, or in disregard of the facts and circumstances. I think the commission did regard them, or that the decision is not supported by substantial evidence. Even if there was parts of the presentation that conflicted, there's still substantial evidence. So I can't get there on that one. The second point, that there wasn't adequate consideration of an alternate time window, is tempting to me. But if I adopt that kind of thinking, I can just propose my own compromise, announce that planning and zoning didn't consider it, and find error on that basis. And that's not, I don't think, the right way to go about it, because that essentially guts the appeal standard. So not being able to find an error, I don't find a way to come up with a compromise or alternate timeframe.
Madam Mayor,
Mhm.
I agree with Councilmember Bajent. I'm struggling to find, even though I'm very tempted as well, that given our limited scope of review here, the error at PNZ that allows us to alter this, coming up with another alternative plan for these parties.
Madam Mayor, I don't want to get into a debate while we're up here.
That's what you're elected to do.
Yeah,
So-
I understand that concern. I think where I find is, when we look at section 5 here, the decision is arbitrary, capricious, or an abuse of discretion, in that it was made without a rational basis or disregard of the facts and circumstances presented. And I think what we're talking about there is the circumstances that were presented were really only that it's either starts at 4 a.m. or it's a shorter time period. And I think that there was disregarding of the facts that we actually could still achieve the longer time period at a longer basis. That's where I'm getting to this point here, is that there was a disregarding of facts, that there was a different time period that we could be looking at.
And last comment, I just don't think that those facts were presented. So it's not disregard of facts and circumstances presented.
So there's a motion on the table that finds error and allows a time change. So I'm going to call the question and then we'll see if there needs to be another motion on the table. Clerk?
Willetts,
Yes.
Bajent,
No.
Halliburton,
Yes.
Haney Keith,
No.
Nash,
Yes.
3 in favor, 2 opposed, motion carries.
All right. Which means that the new staff will return with findings that delineate the reasons the council discussed, and the condition will change to a 5:30 start time from 4 o'clock with everything else remaining. Okay, all right. Thank you all very much. There's nothing else to come before us. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Madam Mayor, I move that we adjourn.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Night, council member.